Hey guys, tonight we're trading your memory foam mattress and sanity-saving sound machine for something a bit less comfortable, a real Victorian prison. I'm talking about the damp and dreadful place that is so grim, your average Victorian criminal would rather break rocks with their teeth than spend one more night inside. So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that white noise, and get as comfortable as possible. But let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what the average sentence was for stealing a handkerchief? Did prisoners get to choose their prison jobs? Or was it more of a congratulations, you're now the official rat wrangler situation? How many hours a day can you spend in total silence before your brain starts reciting tax laws? And did anyone ever actually eat the prison loaf? Or did it simply evolve into a weapon? And would you make friends? Or would you be forced to invent a new type of sock puppet just to have someone to talk to? Congratulations. You've just woken up inside a Victorian prison cell. It's the 1850s. You're wearing someone else's underwear, your mattress is thinner than your last alibi, and you're about to find out why surviving even a single night here is its own kind of miracle. You step through the iron gates, instantly engulfed by the smell of boiled cabbage, cheap soap, and despair. Guards eye you like you're already guilty of something worse, and you get the sense that nobody here is planning a warm welcome. Your new home? A stone box with just enough room to contemplate every bad decision that led you here. Enjoy the view. It's a wall. The first thing you notice, even before the reality of the stone walls sets in, is the sound. Or rather, the lack of it. Victorian prisons ran on the silent system, which is exactly what it sounds like. Absolute, soul-numbing quiet. No friendly chatter, no comfort from a fellow inmate. The only voices you hear are from the guards. And even those are doled out sparingly, like kindness at a tax collector's picnic. It's a place where the cough of a neighbour echoes down the corridor like a death sentence, and the only thing louder than your own heartbeat is the realization that you haven't even met the prison cat yet. As you shuffle forward, your shoes scrape against the stone floor, leaving your dignity behind with every awkward step. You pass by rows of cells, each one a carbon copy of the last, a tiny barred window, a straw mattress thinner than your excuses, and a bucket in the corner whose only job is to humble you daily. The prisoners inside don't meet your eyes. They've perfected the art of looking through people, like everyone here is just a mildly disappointing ghost. You get the sense that privacy isn't a right, it's an ancient rumor. The guards, meanwhile, seem specifically selected for their ability to look unimpressed. Their uniforms are sharp, their mustaches sharper, and their expressions suggest that your greatest crime is inconveniencing them with your mere existence. There's always at least one guard who looks like he's about to write a strongly worded letter to your mother about your posture. Every step is monitored, every hesitation noted, and woe betide anyone who thinks now's a good time for witty banter. Spoiler, it's not. Before you even reach your cell, you're herded through an inspection. The process is roughly as gentle as being processed by an angry sandwich press. Shoes off, arms out, pockets emptied. If you've ever felt awkward at airport security, imagine it with less technology and way more humiliation. Anything even slightly personal, a keepsake, a letter, a hope, is confiscated. What you keep is a uniform, a number, and the profound sense that you should have made better life choices. Then comes the ceremonial handing out of rules, which is mostly just a list of things you're not allowed to do, see, say, or think. No talking, no laughing, no daydreaming out loud. No hiding contraband or unauthorized optimism. Break any rule and you'll be introduced to Victorian discipline, bread and water diets, extra labor, or the legendary shot drill, which is exactly as fun as it sounds, carrying a heavy cannonball back and forth until you either confess to your crimes or lose the will to care. Finally, you're shown to your cell, your new living space, or as the tour brochure would say, a bold reinterpretation of minimalism. The door slams shut behind you, echoing with all the subtlety of a thunderclap in a confession booth. It's here that you realize two things. One, that the rumors about the damp are true. There's already mold trying to make friends with your socks. And two, that you're going to get very familiar with every crack in these stone walls. As the day fades, you're left with the soft, soothing lullaby of distant keys, shuffling footsteps, and someone somewhere regretting the prison loaf. Welcome to the slammer. Enjoy your stay, and try not to make eye contact with the rats. They're here for the long haul too. The intake process is less of a gentle onboarding and more of a public undressing. You're ordered to hand over your clothes, your belongings, and your dignity. In return, you're issued a scratchy uniform, a number, and a stare that says don't get comfortable. First, you're lined up in a drafty corridor with a handful of other newcomers, each of you trying desperately not to make eye contact or, worse, actual contact. The guards move you along with the enthusiasm of bored cattle drivers, only you're not destined for greener pastures, just a series of indignities strung together like Victorian bunting. It starts with your shoes. Off they come, tossed into a pile with everyone else's, instantly turning the hallway into a festival of new and exciting foot odours. Goodbye, arch support. Hello, cold stone floors and existential regret. Next, you're told to strip down, right there, in front of the guards and a couple of prisoners who have clearly seen enough nakedness to last several lifetimes. This isn't a private changing room. There's no curtain, no soothing music, and definitely no spa water with cucumber slices. Your clothes are bagged and tagged, just in case you're ever let out and want to reminisce about the good old days when you had buttons and basic self-esteem. You're handed a rough, shapeless uniform that seems designed specifically to make you look both guilty and uncomfortable. Think Victorian dystopian sleepover meets itchy burlap sack. And then comes the head shave. Victorian prison authorities believed hair was a gateway to lice, vanity, and occasionally escape attempts via elaborate Rapunzel routines. So, off it goes. Whether you arrived with a majestic mane or a widow's peak that already hinted at your crimes against fashion, you're now the proud owner of a patchy buzz cut, administered by someone who wields clippers like they're pruning a hedge with a grudge. You catch a reflection in a cloudy window and realize you've never looked more like someone in need of a fresh start, and possibly a hat. Your possessions are next. Anything sentimental or vaguely personal, a letter from home, a lucky coin, that one perfectly pocket-sized rock you picked up last summer, is confiscated. You ask when you'll get them back, and the answer is a shrug and a mumbled when you leave, which is Victorian for maybe, if the paperwork doesn't catch fire first. What you do get back is a wooden spoon, a chipped tin mug, and the official prison number that replaces your name for the duration of your stay. You are now prisoner 642, not Steve, who once won a pie-eating contest. A guard, whose job description apparently includes crushing hope with a single glare, reads you the rules in a monotone that makes you miss the days of being yelled at. No talking, no whistling, no passing notes, no secret handshakes, no plotting, daydreaming, or any other activities that might lead to joy or rebellion. If you thought school rules were bad, you haven't heard the full Victorian menu. No fidgeting, no humming, no walking too fast or too slow, no looking at the guards funny. You wonder if breathing too enthusiastically is also forbidden. Finally, there's the health inspection. It is neither quick nor gentle. The prison doctor, who probably failed out of regular medicine and landed here for reasons, looks you over with a candle, a stick, and all the warmth of a medieval tax audit. If you're lucky, you get declared fit for prison life. If you're unlucky, you get a dose of tonic so dubious even the rats refuse it. Either way, you're officially processed. As you trudge off in your new uniform, clutching your spoon and your prison number, you realize that whatever you were before, you're now just another cog in the system, stripped of your old self and any illusions about Victorian justice. Welcome to prison. Your dignity will not be returning anytime soon. Welcome to your cell, a masterpiece of Victorian austerity. Stone walls, a wooden plank for a bed, and if you're lucky, a window the size of a postcard. Every echo and drip is your new roommate. The only decor is graffiti from the last unlucky tenant. As the iron door slams behind you, the first thing you notice is the chill. Victorian prisons weren't exactly known for their robust insulation, so your cell has perfected the art of temperature extremes. In winter, it's a walk-in freezer with slightly more despair. In summer, it's an oven that only serves boiled humans. Your mattress, generously described as straw-stuffed, is really just a thin bag of pokey, shifting hay that audibly resents you every time you roll over. Forget memory foam, this stuff barely remembers last week's bed bugs. Directly above your head is a ceiling painted a rich shade of unwashed stone, occasionally adorned with the faded, enigmatic stains that could be anything from candle smoke to Victorian mysteries best left unsolved. A single nail juts from the wall, too high to be useful, too obvious to ignore. It's unclear whether it's for hanging your coat, your hat, or your will to live. The cell door is an iron masterpiece. Thick, cold, and fitted with a spy hole that allows guards to glare at you at random intervals. The slot at the bottom is, in theory, for your meals, but doubles as a handy way to introduce cold drafts, ominous notes, and the odd rat looking for adventure. The hinges creak dramatically with every opening, as if auditioning for a role in a gothic melodrama. Let's talk about lighting. During the day, if the sun is feeling generous and your window isn't facing directly into a brick wall, you might get a faint rectangle of daylight that crawls slowly across the floor like a disinterested cat. At night, you get nothing but darkness and the gentle glimmer of moonlight, which highlights the spider web in the corner and reminds you that at least someone is making themselves at home. If you were hoping for personal space, Victorian prisons redefined the concept. Your cell is just big enough for one miserable person to pace from wall to wall, rehearsing regrets or plotting creative ways to survive breakfast. Sometimes you get a cellmate, usually a snorer, a philosopher, or, in rare cases, someone who talks to their bread crusts. If you're lucky, you're alone, with only the sound of water dripping somewhere it shouldn't, and the slow, methodical chewing of something, hopefully not alive, in the straw. On the upside, there is entertainment. The graffiti. The walls are scrawled with crude illustrations, desperate messages, tally marks, and cryptic advice from previous occupants. Some are hopeful, nearly free, some less so, don't trust the bread, and others so bleak you decide to focus on the recurring drawing of a suspiciously chubby cat. You may add your own masterpiece, perhaps a stick figure escaping heroically, or an epic saga of bread versus stomach. For privacy, you have the illusion of solitude. Sounds from other cells drift in, the cough of someone 2 doors down, the soft muttering of prayers, the clatter of metal against stone. Every noise is amplified by the bare walls. Even your thoughts seem to echo, bouncing back at you with unhelpful commentary. Your personal effects? Limited to a wooden spoon, a tin mug, and whatever crumbs survive the morning rations. The bathroom facilities are minimal. A bucket in the corner, carefully positioned for maximum humiliation. No door, no curtain, just the knowledge that modesty is yet another freedom you left behind at the prison gates. At the end of your first day, you lie on the straw mattress, staring at the graffiti and wondering who exactly invented this brand of punishment by interior design. Welcome to Victorian prison, where comfort comes in the form of lowered expectations, and home improvement is just scratching your name into the wall and hoping someone remembers it. Night falls, bringing with it the symphony of coughs, snores, and the occasional existential wail. Your bed is a thin straw mattress, generously shared with whatever insects call it home. If you manage to sleep, it's not from comfort, it's from sheer exhaustion. The process of lights out in a Victorian prison is less a cozy transition and more an abrupt drop kick into darkness. There's no gentle reminder to brush your teeth. Spoiler, nobody here has a toothbrush. No soothing lullaby, No, would you like me to tuck you in? Instead, the corridor torches are doused with the ceremony of a disgruntled fireman, and your cell is plunged into a darkness so thick you could butter it onto your stale bread. You huddle on your mattress, if you can call it that, wrapped in a blanket that feels like it was woven from regrets and leftover horsehair. The straw inside shifts with your every movement, producing a chorus of crinkles and occasional pokes that make you question whether bed of nails might actually be an upgrade. Every now and then you discover a surprise guest, a beetle, a flea, or something with more legs than seems strictly necessary. Insects are the only things here thriving on the prison diet. Temperature control? Forget it. In winter, the cell is so cold your breath fogs in the moonlight and your toes become philosophical about the meaning of circulation. In summer, the air thickens, sticky and stifling, as you stick to your own skin and silently pray for a breeze, or at least for the cell next door to stop arguing about whose lice are bigger. You try to find a comfortable spot, but your straw mattress has all the ergonomic support of a collapsed wheelbarrow. The soundtrack of Victorian prison sleep is unforgettable, and not in a good way. Every cell holds its own unique soundscape. Someone nearby is locked in a snoring duel with a distant pigeon. A few beds down, a cough ricochets off the stone walls, setting off a chain reaction. One cough, two coughs, a groan, and a muttered curse about the soup. Occasionally, from somewhere in the darkness, a disembodied voice offers the kind of existential commentary that only emerges at 2 a.m. Is it Wednesday, or have we entered a new dimension? The guards do their rounds, their footsteps measured and menacing, keys jangling in a way that makes you wonder if they're secretly composing avant-garde music. Each time you hear the heavy clank of boots and the scrape of a key, you tense, half expecting a surprise inspection, half hoping someone's smuggling in an extra pillow. They peek through the spy hole, ensuring you're still alive and still thoroughly uncomfortable. Privacy, as always, is a luxury you don't possess. The bathroom bucket sits ominously in the corner, a constant reminder that modesty is for free people and aristocrats. You try not to think about the possibility of spilling it in the dark, knowing full well that's exactly what happened to the last unlucky soul whose graffiti now warns, "Do not trust the bucket after midnight." Occasionally, if you're lucky, the cell window grants you a sliver of moonlight, just enough to see the outline of your own misery. You stare at the ceiling, tracing the old stains and spider webs, imagining yourself anywhere else. A warm pub, a real bed, a night without 1,000 unseen legs crawling beneath you. But reality is unyielding, and so is the mattress. If you do drift off, it's not to dreams of freedom, but to the low-level hum of collective discomfort. Sleep comes in shallow waves, punctuated by the shifting of straw, a distant bell, or the realization that your cellmate has started snoring in Morse code. When you finally wake, you're stiff, sore, and somehow both relieved and disappointed to find that yes, you really did survive another night in Victorian prison. Welcome to bedtime, where the only thing heavier than your eyelids is the knowledge that tomorrow night you get to do it all again. Mealtime. If you ever wondered what sadness tastes like, Victorian prison cuisine delivers. Expect grey porridge, rock-hard bread, and something mysterious that might have once been called meat. Seconds? You couldn't pay anyone to want them. The daily ritual of eating in Victorian prison is less about nourishment and more about the slow, steady erosion of your will to live. You shuffle into the mess hall, or, if you're lucky, a bleak little corner of your cell, armed with a tin bowl and a wooden spoon that's seen more scraping than a professional chimney sweep. The smell is a curious blend of boiled grain, old socks, and distant disappointment. Conversation is forbidden, so the only sounds are the clatter of cutlery and the low collective groan as the food arrives. Breakfast kicks things off with a serving of porridge. Not the wholesome, creamy kind you might find in a cosy cottage. This is Victorian prison porridge, a grey, viscous substance that manages to be both watery and lumpy at the same time. It tastes like someone tried to turn boredom into a food group. It sticks to your ribs and, unfortunately, to your spoon, your hands, and occasionally your sense of hope. Some say it's made from oats, but after your third mouthful, you start to suspect it's just ground-up disappointment with a hint of floor sweepings for texture. Lunch is usually more of the same, perhaps with the added excitement of soup, a liquid so thin it could double as dishwater, occasionally bobbing with a mystery vegetable or, on daring days, a fragment of old potato. And then there's the bread, a chunk so hard and heavy it could be used for self-defense. If you're clever, you save your bread as a pillow for the afternoon nap, because eating it straight could cost you a tooth and possibly your will to go on. Sometimes, for variety, they hand out bread that's gone from just stale to sourdough science experiment, its crust so tough you could tap messages through the wall with it. And what of the meat, you ask? Well, Victorian prison meat is less an ingredient and more a philosophical concept. It arrives in greyish cubes or slivers, each piece an enigma. Is it beef? Is it mutton? Is it, as some rumours suggest, the world's oldest pigeon? You chew and chew, searching for flavour, but all you find is a vague, lingering regret. There's an old joke among inmates that if you ever manage to identify what you're eating, you automatically get released for bravery. For those who truly misbehave, there's the legendary prison loaf, a brick-shaped monstrosity of flour, water, and any leftovers that survived the week. It's served cold, dense as a cannonball, and about as appetizing as chewing your own shoe. The only upside is that it makes the regular meals seem almost festive by comparison. Every inmate knows, if you're stuck on the loaf, your main crime was offending the cook. The water? Best described as adventurous. Sometimes cloudy, sometimes tangy, always questionable. Boiling is supposed to make it safe, but you can't boil away the existential undertones. Some prisoners swear by small beer, weak, watery, but at least it's less likely to bite back. There's no dessert, unless you count the weekly plum that's more pit than fruit, or the occasional treat of turnip peelings. For special occasions, you might get a sliver of cheese so thin you have to squint to see it. Birthdays and holidays? Maybe an extra scoop of porridge, because nothing says celebration like an extra serving of monotony. Still, the most remarkable thing about Victorian prison food is its egalitarian misery. Everyone, thief, forger, highwayman, rat wrangler, suffers equally at the hands of the kitchen. You start each meal with hope, end with heartburn, and spend the rest of the day strategizing how to swap your bread for someone else's potato. By the end of your sentence, you'll never take flavor for granted again, or bread, or the sweet freedom to leave a meal unfinished without fearing the wrath of the head cook. Thirsty? Congratulations, you're about to gamble. Water is drawn from the same ancient pipes that have seen things no filter could ever fix. Boiling doesn't kill the flavor of despair. Every day in Victorian prison, you become a reluctant connoisseur of questionable liquids. The first thing you learn is that thirst is never really quenched, just put on hold while your body negotiates terms with whatever lives in the water supply. You line up with your battered tin mug, heart full of hope, nose full of skepticism. There's a communal water barrel sitting in the corridor, looking as though it was last cleaned during the Napoleonic Wars. Floating on the surface is a medley of things that were never meant for human consumption. Bits of straw, flecks of something green, and the occasional insect doing the backstroke. You scoop out your ration, trying to avoid eye contact with the mystery swirl drifting past. Maybe today's special is hints of rust and regret. The taste is unforgettable, in the same way that falling into a swamp is unforgettable. Sometimes the water arrives lukewarm, sometimes oddly gritty, sometimes with a bouquet reminiscent of boiled boots. You tell yourself it's character building, but really it's just bacterial roulette. The prison claims it boils the water, but you're pretty sure that just means someone once yelled at the kettle. The boiling process does very little to remove the aroma, a heady combination of minerals, mildew, and the haunting memory of better drinks. Occasionally, they throw in a handful of something herbal, perhaps to mask the taste, perhaps as a practical joke. If you're lucky, you get a mug with nothing more than the essence of pipe. If you're unlucky, you get floaties. Each one a reminder that the Victorian era invented many things, but not the concept of water filtration. Sometimes, to spice things up, the kitchen hands out small beer instead. A thin, weak brew with so little alcohol that even the lice avoid it. But at least small beer is boiled, so you can drink it without your intestines filing a formal complaint. Water, on the other hand, is for the truly brave or truly desperate. There's a joke among prisoners: if the meat doesn't kill you, the water will finish the job. And let's face it, most of you aren't here for your risk management skills. The effect on your body is both immediate and lasting. The first sip shocks your taste buds, the second challenges your immune system, and the third makes you question the decisions that led you here. Your mouth always feels a little sticky, your throat always a little scratchy. And you start to wonder if humans actually need water, or if it's just a cruel Victorian myth. Some prisoners try to get creative, saving up their weekly turnip rations and squeezing out a few drops of juice. Or, in the most desperate cases, praying for rain and sticking their tin mug out the window for something that doesn't taste like despair. The lucky prisoners with jobs in the kitchen sometimes get a glimpse of what the water looks like before it's served. Spoiler: it doesn't improve the drinking experience. If you're caught complaining, you're told to be grateful for the hydration. It builds character, says the guard, sipping from a canteen he brought from home. And so, every day, you face the same dilemma. Drink the prison water and accept your fate. Or try to ration what little small beer you have left and spend the afternoon thirstier than a Victorian sermon. By the end of your sentence, you'll find yourself staring lovingly at even the dullest puddle in the street, knowing deep down that at least it isn't served in a tin mug with a side of existential dread. So next time you turn on the tap at home, watch the clear water pour out, and fill a glass with ice cubes and a twist of lemon. Maybe raise it in salute to the survivors of the Victorian prison plumbing system, the only people who know the true taste of perseverance, bacteria, and just a little bit of historical trauma. The silence system means you spend your days pretending you're invisible. Speaking is forbidden. Communicating with fellow inmates is an art of raised eyebrows and clandestine coughs. It's less prison drama, more silent retreat hosted by Satan. You might imagine prison is a noisy place, clanking bars, shouts, raucous brawls, but not here. Victorian prison reformers believed that total silence would breed reflection and repentance. In reality, it just breeds a population of expert mime artists and amateur telepaths. The official rule is simple: keep your mouth shut at all times. The unofficial rule? Learn to convey complex emotions using only your left eyebrow and the subtle tilt of your wooden spoon. Every morning you rise with the bell, file silently into line, and move about the day with your eyes fixed on the floor. No talking in the corridor, no whispering in the yard, and absolutely no chatting over the bowl of existentially grey porridge. If you sneeze too loudly, 3 guards look up in unison and make a note for potential future outburst. Laughter? Forget it. Even a smile can draw suspicion. Clearly you're plotting an escape or worse, enjoying yourself. Of course, humans are social animals, and Victorian prisoners are nothing if not resourceful. Quickly, you and your cellmates develop an entire underground language of gestures. There's the infamous double blink, I'm about to faint from hunger, the slow head nod, I too fear the porridge, and the universal sign for watch out, the guard who hates everyone is making his rounds. Some of the old-timers even perfect the art of accidental foot shuffling, short, sharp scuffs in sequence to pass coded messages down the hall. If you squint, it's almost poetic. If you're a guard, it's just suspicious. Breaking the silence comes with consequences, and Victorian punishments are never creative in a good way. The first offence gets you a lecture and a cold stare. The second earns you extra labour, bread and water, or, if you're truly unlucky, solitary confinement. The one place where silence is less a rule and more a force of nature. You learn quickly. After one night in the punishment cell, you'd rather discuss the meaning of life with a particularly stern cockroach than risk another word. Work in silence, walk in silence, even bathe in silence. The echoes in the bathhouse turn every accidental splash into an event, and you become hyper-aware of every movement. Dropping your soap is not just embarrassing, it's deafening. Occasionally, a new prisoner cracks, unleashing a cascade of muttered curses or desperate jokes. The guards descend like hawks, and the rest of you silently thank them for distracting attention from your own accidental throat clearing. Social life doesn't entirely die, it just mutates. You exchange meaningful glances in the exercise yard, trade secret messages scratched on the underside of a bread crust, and become an expert in Morse code, using only the tools at hand, spoon tapping, tin cup clinks, or the gentle thud of a loaf hitting the floor. Every so often, someone gets bold and manages to whisper a few words during the night shift. These fleeting moments of connection feel almost illicit, like contraband hope. Silence, paradoxically, becomes noisy. Your mind fills the void with memories, daydreams, and invented conversations. You mentally rehearse arguments, replay old jokes, or compose letters you'll never send. The steady background soundtrack is the shuffling of feet, the distant slam of a cell door, and the low perpetual hum of 50 people trying desperately not to be heard. By the end of your sentence, you're fluent in eyebrow Morse and could probably hold a full debate with nothing but a well-timed sigh. But you also emerge with a new appreciation for noise, the freedom to cough, to shout, to laugh out loud without the threat of extra chores. Silence may be golden, but here it's just another shackle, one more way the prison keeps you locked inside, long after the cell door finally opens. Welcome to outdoor time, which is less a break and more a parade of shambling misery. You march in circles, eyes down, while guards scrutinize every twitch. The main activity? Trying not to make eye contact with the pigeons. You might think yard time means a chance to stretch, chat, and feel vaguely human again. Not here. The Victorian exercise yard is an experiment in how many ways you can walk in a circle while pretending you don't have emotions. There's no friendly basketball game, no rousing chess match in the sunshine. Just a slow, synchronized shuffle that would make a funeral procession look like a flash mob. The air might be fresh, but the mood is distinctly flat. The yard itself is a rectangular patch of packed dirt, surrounded by stone walls taller than most ambitions. The only view is sky, grey, usually, as if even the weather is in on the joke. There are no benches, no shade, no cheerful flower beds. If you're lucky, you get a weed growing bravely in a crack. Sometimes a stray dog looks in, takes one sniff, and decides to seek a better crowd elsewhere. And then there's the company, a mix of fellow inmates, each one lost in their own world of regrets and internal monologues. Everyone's silent, thanks to the rules, which means socializing is limited to subtle glances and the odd accidental shoulder bump. If you get caught whispering, it's straight back inside. Still, even in silence, the yard becomes a stage for the full spectrum of human emotion, exhaustion, boredom, and a touch of existential dread. The guards, meanwhile, perform their own parade. They pace the edges, arms folded, eyes narrowed, always a half step away from believing you're up to something. Some guards enjoy the surveillance a little too much, twirling their keys like gunslingers in a western. If you so much as sneeze with excessive gusto, 3 pairs of eyes snap to you instantly. There's an art to not looking suspicious when all you're doing is trying to blink the right number of times. Then there are the pigeons, the only truly free souls in the yard. They strut with a confidence none of the inmates can muster, occasionally pecking at invisible crumbs and side-eyeing you with an authority that feels personal. You start to wonder if the pigeons are spies. If somewhere a warden is getting a daily report on who blinked twice and who tried to sneak a smile. The boldest prisoners feed them tiny bits of bread crust, more for companionship than charity. Pigeons don't judge, they just stare. For exercise, you're expected to march, not wander. Victorian reformers believed order and routine could rehabilitate anyone, so you walk in rigid lines, following chalk marks that trace the same path over and over until you could do it with your eyes closed. The silence is broken only by the shuffling of feet, the occasional cough, and the distant clanging of a bell. If you're lucky, the sun peeks through for a moment, turning the dust gold and making the whole place feel briefly less miserable. Most days, though, it's just grey on grey. Occasionally, someone gets bold, stretching a little too enthusiastically or attempting a discreet hop. The guards are not amused. There's a running joke among inmates that anyone caught skipping gets sentenced to extra time just for cheerfulness. It's a risk nobody takes. At the end of yard time, you're herded back inside, noses red from the chill or sun, muscles a little looser, but souls still tightly wound. You return to your cell with a newfound appreciation for the subtle art of walking, and maybe, just maybe, you caught a whiff of freedom on the breeze, right before a pigeon dropped something on your shoulder. Victorian exercise. Less about health, more about reminding you that even the birds are above your pay grade. Every inmate gets a job. Some break rocks, others pick oakum, which is Victorian for rip apart rope until you hate rope forever. If you dreamed of a career in crushing your own soul, you're in luck. Victorian prison labour isn't so much about rehabilitation as it is about breaking your spirit into manageable, paperwork-friendly chunks. The theory is that hard work builds character and makes you less likely to reoffend. In practice, it just gives you blisters, back pain, and the recurring nightmare that you're being chased by a giant rope. First up, breaking rocks. If you ever romanticize the idea of working outdoors, swinging a hammer in the sunshine, maybe humming a jaunty tune, stop. The reality is less outdoor adventure and more relentless geological vengeance. You're marched out to the prison yard at dawn, handed a sledgehammer that's somehow heavier than your regrets, and pointed at a mountain of rocks. The goal? Smash them into gravel. The reward? A sore back and a creeping suspicion that these rocks are somehow multiplying when you're not looking. It's the sort of job that makes you long for a desk and a stack of mind-numbing spreadsheets. Not lucky enough for rocks? Don't worry, there's always oakum picking. Oakum, for those not fluent in Victorian misery, is old rope saturated with tar that's been salvaged from decommissioned ships. Your task: tease the fibres apart, one splinter at a time, until your fingers are raw and your sanity has packed its bags. The tar seeps under your fingernails, the rope dust gets in your nose, and by the end of your shift, you've developed a relationship with rope that's somewhere between lifelong enemy and Stockholm Syndrome. The only thing less pleasant than the task itself is the smell. A heady mix of old boat, sweat, and existential regret. Then there are the specialist roles. Some prisoners are put to work in the laundry, which means boiling endless sheets in cauldrons of soapy water and trying not to think about where, exactly, those stains came from. Others work in the kitchens, peeling potatoes with blunt knives and trying not to accidentally season the stew with their own tears. The luckiest are assigned to the library, sorting ancient moral tracts, dusting shelves, and pretending not to notice that Moby Dick is actually just a hollowed-out hiding place for forbidden messages. Every job comes with rules, naturally. Work in silence, don't talk, don't drop anything, and above all, don't look like you're having fun. If you're caught whistling, you get an extra hour of duty. If you're caught complaining, you get an extra day. The only thing worse than being assigned a task is being found slacking off. Prison wardens possess an uncanny sense for detecting even a nanosecond of joy. For those whose bodies or attitudes can't handle the regular jobs, there are always the truly mind-bending tasks. The treadmill, for instance, a giant wheel you walk on for hours like a hamster with anxiety. Or the crank, a device you turn endlessly, attached to nothing at all, just to prove your willingness to suffer for no reason whatsoever. Victorian innovation at its finest. Meals are tied to your productivity. Work fast enough, and you might be spared an extra helping of despair for dinner. Slack, and it's back to the bread and water routine, which is exactly as cheerful as it sounds. The hierarchy of jobs is well known among inmates. The kitchen staff get the best gossip, and sometimes a bonus potato, while rock breakers develop arms like blacksmiths and the 1,000-yard stare of someone who's seen too much limestone. By the end of your sentence, you've mastered skills nobody will pay you for: oakum picking, stone smashing, soul crushing. The only thing you take with you is a set of muscles you never asked for and the certainty that, whatever happens in the outside world, at least you'll never have to rip apart rope for a living again. Probably. Bathing is infrequent, public, and performed with cold water and colder stares. Soap is doled out like gold, and privacy is a fond, distant memory. If you ever dreamed of a long, luxurious soak to the gentle sounds of piano music, congratulations, you are in the wrong century and the wrong building. Bathing day in Victorian prison comes with all the glamour of a livestock auction and roughly the same scent profile. The prison authorities believed in cleanliness, but only in theory and only on a schedule that seems to have been designed by someone who hated both water and people. Bathing happens once a week, maybe, and only if you're on the warden's list of inmates likely to survive another 7 days. The routine begins with a guard shouting orders that make you question your life choices. You line up with the other inmates, each of you clutching a bar of soap the size of a postage stamp. The soap itself is a relic from a lost age, hard, lumpy, and about as effective as rubbing a potato on your skin. Sometimes there isn't enough to go around, so you just pretend you're cleaning yourself with a cube of ancient cheddar. The bathhouse is a cavernous, draughty chamber, echoing with shivers and the slosh of icy water. There's no privacy, no cubicles, just a row of battered metal tubs, each one bearing the scars of 1,000 reluctant scrubbings. The water is cold, always. Hot water is reserved for emergencies, special occasions, and probably only for the warden's cat. You step in and immediately regret every crime, every poor decision, and every day that led you to this moment. The shock of the cold makes you gasp, a sound quickly stifled, lest you seem ungrateful for this luxury. If you manage to sit, the water comes up to somewhere between your knees and your ego. Any dirt the bath removes is replaced by the sheer trauma of the experience. There's a rhythm to bathing. Dip, scrub, shiver, repeat. Guards patrol up and down, ensuring nobody gets too comfortable or too clean. If you try to linger, you're met with a reminder that there are 50 others waiting their turn, and nobody's here for the spa package. Sharing is the name of the game. The water is communal, changed only once the dirt achieves the consistency of soup. This means the unlucky few at the end of the line get to bathe in a stew of the day's efforts, a mixture of sweat, misery, and whatever the guy in front of you was harboring on his shins. You try not to think about it. You definitely don't open your mouth. Your clothes, such as they are, get a once-over in the laundry, an ordeal involving boiling, scrubbing, and hoping the seams hold out for another week. The scent of clean in Victorian prison is best described as less horrible than before. After washing, you pull on your still damp uniform, which, thanks to the climate, will remain slightly clammy until next Tuesday. Personal grooming isn't encouraged, just tolerated. Razors, when provided, are duller than most guards' wits, and mirrors a polished tin that reflect your face back like a haunted pancake. Lice combs circulate, but they're in constant demand, and the lice seem to have unionized. The guards perform routine critter checks, searching for evidence of hygiene violations or new colonies of six-legged residents. The only real winners are the rats, who seem to thrive regardless of how much soap you use. At the end of bathing day, you feel a strange mixture of relief and embarrassment. You're cleaner, maybe, but also acutely aware that everyone has now seen you from every possible angle. You return to your cell with wet hair, chapped skin, and the lingering suspicion that you were somehow cleaner before this ordeal began. Hygiene in Victorian prison isn't about feeling fresh. It's about surviving another week with your skin mostly intact, your dignity slightly battered, and a new appreciation for the wonders of hot showers and locked bathroom doors. Authority figures are everywhere, each with a face carved from stone and a rule book thicker than your patience. Befriending a warden is impossible, surviving one's daily inspections even less likely. Victorian prisons are crawling with authority, wardens in starched uniforms, turnkeys with jangling key rings, guards who look as if they were carved out of whatever was left over from building the walls. Their main job? To ensure you never, ever forget who's in charge. Their secondary job? Perfecting the art of making even a glance feel like an accusation. You'll quickly learn that in Victorian prison, the staff are as much a fixture as the cold stone walls and the ominous bucket in the corner. The warden is the king of this unhappy castle. He glides through the corridors, his boots echoing like a death sentence, every button of his uniform polished to a blinding shine. His eyes seem to see through brick, steel, and whatever paper-thin excuse you were planning to offer for why you're out of line. Nobody knows where the warden sleeps. Some say he never does, preferring to nap standing up, powered by pure suspicion and weak tea. There's no winning points with him. If you're invisible, you're doing it right. Turnkeys are the middle management of misery, responsible for opening doors, locking them again, and frowning disapprovingly at anyone who so much as breathes out of sync. Every turnkey has a different method. Some clank their keys with theatrical menace. Some shuffle along silently, and one or two have perfected a glare that can make soup curdle. They run inspections, checking for contraband, like illicit crusts of bread or forbidden optimism, and keeping the pecking order clear. Their greatest joy comes from catching a rule breaker, even a suspected one. The sentence for looking shifty is often just an extra round of pointless labour or, if you're unlucky, a transfer to that cell, the one where the floor leaks and hope goes to die. Of course, there's always that one guard. You know the one. Maybe he's the result of too many years surrounded by concrete and not enough hugs as a child. He can spot you in a crowd of identical uniforms and always seems to appear just as you're thinking about maybe, possibly, smiling. His favourite activities include inventing new infractions, inspecting your bed for wrinkles that can only be detected by advanced Victorian microscopy, and quizzing you on the prison rules at the worst possible times, like when you're ankle-deep in freezing water on laundry duty. The daily inspection is an event to dread. Every morning, your cell becomes a stage for the world's most stressful one-man show. The guards stomp in, clipboards at the ready, searching for infractions with the zeal of amateur detectives. The warden might trail behind, arms crossed, radiating silent disappointment. They poke at your mattress, sniff your uniform, and check your mug for unauthorized uses, like smiling into it. Contraband is confiscated. Explanations are ignored. Complaints are met with a lecture on the importance of discipline and a demonstration of just how many push-ups a person can do in shackles. Don't be fooled into thinking you can befriend the staff. There are no friendly chats, no moments of understanding. At best, you're invisible. At worst, you're the day's main entertainment. Some prisoners dream of getting on a guard's good side, but the only good side is the one that walks past your cell without stopping. Even the staff have their own pecking order. The guards grumble about the warden, the turnkeys grumble about the guards, and everyone grumbles about the kitchen staff, who somehow have access to real potatoes. Occasionally, you'll catch snippets of their own drama, arguments about shifts, missing keys, or the proper way to scowl. In the end, the authority figures of Victorian prison are not just people. They are the system, manifest in flesh, moustache, and badge. They are a reminder, every hour of every day, that freedom is not just about open doors. It's about not having to memorize a rule book the size of a dictionary and not flinching every time you hear the jingle of keys. Your clothes are standardized misery, striped, itchy, and somehow always damp. The cap alone is enough to convince you that style is dead and never coming back. There's something special about the moment you're handed your Victorian prison uniform, a package of fabric and shame rolled into one. The first thing you notice is the colour, a drab, lifeless shade of grey, or, if you're really lucky, a sickly yellow and black stripe pattern that screams, "I'm not here by choice." The stripes are meant to make you instantly recognisable in case you decide to break for freedom. Subtlety was not high on the designer's list of priorities. Let's talk about fabric. Victorian prison uniforms are made from the coarsest wool or the roughest cotton ever to grace human skin. The sensation is somewhere between sandpaper and burlap sack. As you pull on the trousers, stiff, shapeless, and alarmingly high-waisted, you begin to understand why the other inmates look so grumpy. The shirt is no better, clinging to your skin in a way that ensures every seam, every patch, and every past laundry mishap is felt on a personal level. The more you move, the more it itches, until you're convinced your entire body is just one big rash waiting for a diagnosis. Then there's the cap. Oh, the cap. It's a small, flat, and eternally damp masterpiece of bad taste, perched atop your head like a surrender flag. No matter how you try to style it, you end up looking like a cross between a disgraced chimney sweep and a child's failed arts and crafts project. It slides around when you try to walk, folds your ears into creative new shapes, and seems to generate moisture out of thin air. Legend has it that the prison cap was invented by someone with a personal vendetta against hats and comfort in general. Footwear isn't much of an upgrade. If you're issued shoes at all, they're 2 sizes too large or 2 sizes too small, never just right. Made from untreated leather and held together by hope and a single stubborn thread, they squeak with every step and fill instantly with water during the rare bath or the all-too-common leaky cell moment. Blisters aren't a possibility, they're a certainty, a little souvenir with every shift change. Laundry day is not a day of hope and rejuvenation. It's a day of forced optimism as you hand your uniform over to the laundry staff, only to have it return somehow stiffer, scratchier, and faintly scented of boiled despair. The stains never really come out. They just fade into the background, creating a patchwork of questionable provenance. Buttons vanish mysteriously, and sewing repairs are carried out by fellow inmates with about as much tailoring skill as a mildly ambitious goat. There's no such thing as seasonal attire. Summer, sweat and itchiness under thick wool. Winter, shiver and itchiness under the same thick wool. Rain, your uniform absorbs it like a sponge, and you discover new ways to experience damp. On very special days, you might get a replacement pair of socks, a gesture that feels both generous and entirely futile, since they'll be as scratchy and grey as everything else. Uniforms are one size fits all, and by fits all, the authorities clearly mean fits no one. Too tight in all the wrong places, too loose in all the others, it's a daily battle to keep your dignity, your warmth, and your trousers from introducing themselves to the rest of the yard. Any attempt at customization, rolling sleeves, tightening a belt, or even daring to tuck in your shirt is met with swift correction from a guard who seems personally offended by creativity. After just a few days, you start to recognize people less by their faces and more by the creative holes and patches in their uniforms. The stripes blur together into a sea of institutional gloom, each inmate a moving barcode of penitentiary disappointment. By the time you're released, if you ever are, you'll never take soft, colourful, properly sized clothing for granted again. Until then, you march, itch, and sweat in style that history mercifully forgot. Religion is a compulsory event, not a comfort. The chapel is cold and echoing. Sermons are eternal, and hope feels more like an inside joke. Every week, sometimes more often, depending on your crimes or the warden's mood, you're herded into the prison chapel. There's no option to opt out, fake illness, or claim a prior engagement with the rats under your bed. Attendance is mandatory, participation is observed, and enthusiasm is highly discouraged. The guards stand at the doors, arms folded, eyes narrowed, daring you to even think about sneaking in a nap. The chapel itself is an exercise in Victorian penitential chic. Stark stone walls, wooden pews that have never known the touch of a cushion, and a ceiling so high and draughty it might as well be outdoors. The cold settles in your bones before the preacher even utters a word. Light filters in through dirty windows, illuminating clouds of breath and the occasional drifting dust mote. The only colour in the place is the bruised purple of your own shins after bumping into yet another unyielding pew. You shuffle in and take your seat, shoulders hunched, knees jammed against the wood in front of you. There's no choir, no music, unless you count the sound of someone coughing in the back and the occasional creak of the pulpit. The chaplain arrives, solemn as an undertaker, carrying a Bible so heavy it could double as a weapon in the wrong hands. He launches into a sermon of truly Victorian proportions, endless, meandering, and designed less to inspire and more to exhaust your capacity for attention. If you lose your place, don't worry. You can pick up again any time. The message is always the same. Repent, behave, and pray you make it through another week without landing in solitary. Hope, here, is a carefully rationed commodity. The chaplain preaches about redemption, but the echoing emptiness makes it feel like he's talking to someone far, far away, maybe someone in another prison. Occasionally, he tries to relate a story or two, parable, moral lesson, stern warning, but they all blur together into a sort of spiritual porridge. Nourishing in theory, bland in practice, and impossible to remember 10 minutes later. Most inmates attend in a fog of regret and sleep deprivation. Some close their eyes and meditate on their misfortunes. Others count the cracks in the ceiling or read the graffiti carved discreetly into the wood. Bill was here, 1860. 2. Still bored. Don't snore, chaplain throws hymnals. Hope is not included. You quickly discover the art of looking attentive while your mind is miles away, possibly rehearsing your acceptance speech for best supporting role in a place nobody wants to be. Religion in the Victorian prison isn't just about saving your soul, it's another means of control. The chapel doubles as a place for confession, forced apologies, and the occasional public shaming for those who dared to sneak an extra crust of bread. If you're really unlucky, the chaplain might single you out for a talk, a gentle reminder that salvation comes to those who follow the rules, or at least those who pretend convincingly. You nod, agree, and try to look like someone who's about to turn over a new leaf, even if you know the only thing you're turning is a page in your mental escape plan. By the time the service ends, your legs are numb, your spirit is only slightly more battered, and the guards usher you back to your cell with all the compassion of a sheepdog, rounding up particularly unruly sheep. Some inmates whisper prayers for strength, others pray simply for a shorter sermon next time. The chapel is less a place of hope than a place where hope is systematically audited. Here, repentance is just another entry on your daily to-do list. Repeat as necessary. Regret is assumed, redemption is optional, and faith, well, that's something you'll have to find somewhere between the pews, the stone walls, and the next endless sermon. If you're lucky, you might get a letter from someone on the outside. It'll be heavily censored, of course, and read aloud by a guard who never gets to the good parts. The arrival of mail is an event so rare in Victorian prison that it's spoken of with the same hushed reverence reserved for comets and unexpected potatoes at dinner. When the day finally comes, the anticipation builds. The whole wing seems to hold its breath, ears straining for the sound of boots on flagstone and the rustle of envelopes. It doesn't matter that you're sharing a cell with 50 other hopefuls. Each of you quietly calculates the odds that, just this once, your name will be called. The guard tasked with mail duty always seems to take special pleasure in dragging out the suspense. He shuffles through the pile with deliberate slowness, peering over his spectacles like he's reading wills instead of letters. Names are called one by one, and if yours finally comes up, you're the envy of the wing for at least a solid 10 minutes. But don't get too excited. Letters are sacred, but privacy is not. Before you even touch the envelope, it's been opened, scanned, and censored by several layers of administration. Anything remotely cheerful, scandalous, or even slightly hopeful is blacked out with a thick line of ink. You might get, "Dearest, redacted." The weather is redacted, and the children are. And that's where the guard usually stops, either for dramatic effect or because even he can't make out what's underneath. Of course, reading the letter yourself is out of the question. The honor goes to the guard, who recites the heavily edited words with all the enthusiasm of someone announcing a new tax. If the letter is long, he'll summarize, "Your Aunt Mabel says hello, your neighbor's pig is still missing, and no, she didn't send any cake. Cake is always mentioned, and never delivered." Still, there's something magical about hearing news from the world outside your stone walls. Maybe your sister had another baby. Maybe your dog has forgotten you. Maybe the local pub has finally fixed that wobbly table. Even the most mundane details are a lifeline, a reminder that there's a world where people wear real clothes and eat food that doesn't double as a blunt instrument. Not all letters are good news, of course. Sometimes a friend forgets to write, or worse, remembers and uses the opportunity to lecture you about your life choices and how Cousin Alfred is doing much better now that he sells boots. Other times you hear of a death in the family, or a marriage you weren't invited to, or the slow decline of the family turnip crop. Bad news travels as fast as good news, maybe faster, since the guards seem to savor those bits a little extra. If you're inclined to reply, you can try to send a letter back, though your words will take the same scenic tour through the hands of every authority in the building. Your I miss you might become I am redacted. Your carefully hidden jokes will be stripped bare, and if you slip in anything too clever, you might lose mail privileges for a month. Victorian bureaucracy is undefeated. Some prisoners get creative, hiding messages in laundry or inventing secret codes, though this is a dangerous game, and the guards are always on the lookout for suspiciously poetic laundry lists. For the truly desperate, there's always the option of bribing the kitchen staff to slip out a note with the potato delivery. Rumor has it, some of the best news arrives wrapped around a carrot. Most days you go without mail, wondering if your friends have forgotten or if the censors are simply enjoying the plot twists too much to let you in on them. Still, you listen eagerly every mail day, hoping for a word, a name, a memory, anything to remind you that, somewhere beyond these walls, the world keeps turning. And if you're very, very lucky, your letter comes with a drawing from a niece or nephew, crude, joyful, and mercifully uncensored. For a brief moment, you remember what hope feels like. Then the guard clears his throat, hands you a scrap of redacted paper, and moves on to the next cell. Life and censorship resume as usual. Step out of line and meet the true creativity of Victorian consequences. Extra labour, bread, and water diets, or even solitary confinement. The only thing worse than the rules are the ways they're enforced. Living in a Victorian prison is already punishment enough. But the system had a way of reminding you that things could always, somehow, get worse. The rulebook is as thick as a brick, and even thicker in practice, detailing hundreds of infractions, both real and imagined. Whisper in the yard? That's an infraction. Smile at breakfast? That's suspicious. Breathe too enthusiastically during the warden's inspection? You're clearly planning a coup. If you're unlucky enough to draw attention, the first punishment you'll likely encounter is extra labor. This isn't just work a little longer. It's, let's see if we can discover new muscles to make sore. If you thought breaking rocks for 8 hours was tiring, wait until they hand you a pile of oakum and tell you to keep picking until you've unraveled your own willpower. Sometimes it's the crank, turning a heavy iron handle attached to absolutely nothing for hours, simply because someone in the 19th century thought boredom and exhaustion made for good rehabilitation. The ultimate goal seems to be to sap your strength, your energy, and your will to ever say anything interesting again. Then there's the infamous bread and water diet. As a concept, it sounds almost whimsical, like something you'd threaten your picky toddler with. In practice, it's less charmingly minimal and more culinary despair. Breakfast, bread. Lunch, bread. Dinner, a cup of tepid water with the faint taste of disappointment. If you're lucky, the bread is only slightly stale and doesn't double as a blunt weapon. The diet was believed to encourage reflection, but mostly it encourages intense daydreams about cheese, butter, and a potato that isn't just decorative. For more serious or repeat offences, it's off to solitary confinement. Solitary is a grand name for a small, dark, airless box where you're left alone with nothing but your thoughts and a bucket that's seen better days. The walls are so close you start to suspect they're inching closer with every passing minute. There's no window, no bed, just a cold stone floor and the echo of your own regrets. Some prisoners last hours, others days. Everyone comes out with a new appreciation for the sound of human voices, even if it's just the guard reading out your infractions for the 4th time this week. And don't forget the shot drill. If you were really unlucky, you'd be handed a heavy iron ball and told to carry it from one end of the yard to the other, over and over, under the watchful eye of a guard who thinks fun should be illegal. It's exercise, discipline, and public humiliation rolled into one. If you drop the ball, literally or figuratively, it's back to bread and water. Enforcement is where the real creativity shines. The guards, never ones to pass up an opportunity for drama, turn minor inspections into theatrical productions. A single smudge on your tin cup can be spun into a 10-minute lecture on morality. Some guards love to play favourites. Others seem to choose targets based on which way the wind is blowing or which prisoner looked at them funny during prayers. There are even punishments for talking about punishments. Try to warn a new inmate about the rules, and you'll find yourself mysteriously cleaning every bucket in the building before sundown. Try to smuggle out a message about the bread, and the next day's loaf will be shaped like a question mark, just to mess with you. In the end, Victorian prison discipline is relentless, inventive, and always ready to surprise you with new and exciting ways to regret your choices. You might come in a lawbreaker, but you'll leave a master of keeping your head down, your lips sealed, and your bread carefully hidden from sight. The punishment cell is a featureless tomb where time stretches, your mind wanders, and you seriously consider starting a conversation with the cracks in the wall. Victorian solitary confinement isn't just a place, it's an experience, and not the kind advertised in travel brochures. Sent there for talking out of turn, laughing at the wrong moment, or just being on the wrong end of a bored guard's mood, you quickly discover the true meaning of solitary. The cell itself is so small and bare you could memorize every bump in the stonework before the hour is up. Forget the luxury of a bed. You're lucky if there's a flat piece of floor without a mysterious stain. A single high-up slit masquerades as a window, admitting just enough light to let you know that time is definitely not moving. The door shuts with a finality that echoes in your bones. Outside, the sounds of the prison continue. Footsteps, distant coughs, the muffled clang of labour. But inside, it's just you and your thoughts. And if you think that sounds peaceful, you clearly haven't spent quality time with your own unfiltered brain. For the first hour, you might try pacing. The second hour, you count bricks. By hour 3, you've started reciting your favourite recipes or the names of every dog you've ever met. By hour 4, you're convinced the cracks in the wall are forming letters. By hour 5, you're arguing with them. There's no bucket list in solitary, just a bucket. It sits in the corner, judging you. There's nowhere to go, nothing to do, and nobody to tell you if you've got something stuck in your teeth. Meals, when they come, arrive through a hatch in the door, accompanied by the minimum number of words a guard can legally utter. Eat. Drink. No. You can't have seconds. Conversation is forbidden, but you wouldn't have much to say anyway. All your best material is wasted on the wall. The rules are simple. No sound, no movement, unless it's absolutely necessary. No reading, no writing, no entertainment of any kind. Even your own imagination starts to fray around the edges after a while. You daydream about open spaces, about conversations with actual people, about the luxury of seeing more than 3 feet in any direction. You may start to invent companions. Maybe a spider in the corner becomes your new best friend, or you begin to assign personalities to the chips in the stonework. Barry the Brick is surprisingly judgmental. Time in solitary is elastic. Minutes feel like hours, hours stretch into days. You start to notice your own heartbeat, the way your stomach rumbles, the uncomfortable reality that even your thoughts have started to narrate themselves in the warden's voice. Sleep comes and goes in strange bursts. The darkness is absolute, the silence almost oppressive. Sometimes you dream you've been released, only to wake up and find the same four walls staring back at you. Some prisoners try to mark the passing hours by scratching lines into the stone with a fingernail or a stolen sliver of bread crust. Others lose track completely, re-emerging into the world with the sunken-eyed look of someone who has seen every side of a broom closet and knows none of them are good. Solitary is supposed to teach you a lesson about obedience, about self-control, about the wisdom of keeping your mouth shut. In practice, it mostly teaches you that the human mind, left alone, is a weird and slightly alarming place. When your time is finally up, the cell door swings open and the light is almost blinding. The first sound of another human voice makes you want to laugh, cry, and hug the guard all at once, until you remember that he's the one who put you in here. You shuffle out, blinking, and silently vowing never to tell another joke at breakfast, no matter how good it is. Solitary. The place where the only conversation worth having is with your own sanity. And you're not always sure who's winning. Feel sick? Don't worry. The prison infirmary awaits with cures worse than the illness. Doctors will see you now, just as soon as they find their leeches and a healthy disregard for pain. Victorian prison medicine operates on two guiding principles: hope for the best and apply a poultice to the rest. If you so much as sneeze suspiciously, you're off to the infirmary, a place that smells faintly of boiled cabbage, wet wool, and regret. The prison doctor is less Dr. House and more man with a mustache and a copy of Gray's Anatomy that's mostly used as a doorstop. His bedside manner is brisk, bordering on traumatic. His toolkit: a rusty saw, some twine, and, if you're lucky, a bottle of gin, for him, not you. Let's say you turn up with a fever. Before anyone bothers with a thermometer, you're asked if you've made your peace with your maker. If you haven't, now's the time. The diagnosis usually falls into one of two categories. Not serious, in which case you're told to drink water and walk it off, or potentially fatal, in which case you're prescribed rest, more water, and possibly a visit from the chaplain. Victorian medicine is deeply suspicious of comfort. If you're sweating and shivering, the treatment is a cold compress and an encouraging slap on the back. Headaches and minor injuries are dealt with by a combination of herbal tonics and the time-honoured bleeding, the idea being that whatever ails you, a good session with a leech will rebalance your bodily humours. Leech therapy is applied enthusiastically, even for stubbed toes and mysterious rashes. The leeches are the healthiest beings in the infirmary, thriving on the steady diet of confused inmates. If you ask for pain relief, the doctor offers advice. Think of England, or, failing that, stop complaining. Broken bones? Ah, now you're in for a treat. The prison sawbones is delighted by an opportunity to set a fracture, preferably without anesthesia, and certainly without any regard for alignment. Splints are made from whatever's handy: spoons, broom handles, the remains of last year's Christmas dinner. There's a good chance your leg will heal, but it may now point in a more interesting direction. Dental problems are legendary. Toothaches are common. See bread, rock hard, and the only solution is extraction. You'll be summoned to the infirmary, handed a rag to bite down on, and then experience the unfiltered joys of barber dentistry. If you're lucky, the barber's hands are steady. If not, you leave with fewer teeth and a new fear of mustachioed men holding pliers. Anything contagious, coughs, spots, unexplained fevers, is dealt with by quarantine, which means being locked in a room with the other unlucky sneezers. You're handed a blanket and a bucket and reminded not to die too noisily. Serious outbreaks can sweep through a prison like wildfire, and the medical response is to pray, open the windows, and burn a little extra incense in the chapel for good measure. Nursing care is, how shall we put this, basic. The staff consists of other prisoners. usually selected for their ability to lift a bucket without fainting. Bandages are reused, beds are shared, and the best medicine available is sleep, if you can get it. On rare occasions, a particularly generous warden arranges for a real doctor to visit, but by then most of the inmates have either recovered, adapted, or decided to stick with the leech. Medical records are thin, and your complaints are logged somewhere beneath rat count and bread consistency. By the end of your sentence, you're either surprisingly robust, having survived diseases, treatments, and the general ambience of Victorian medicine, or you've joined the long list of inmates who left the infirmary with a new appreciation for modern pharmaceuticals and the radical concept of washing your hands. Next time you see a doctor, remember, it could always be worse. You could be in Victorian prison, prescribed leeches for heartbreak and a brisk amputation for a mild cold. You didn't think prison had cliques? Welcome to a world where alliances are forged in silence and loyalties last only as long as the next potato ration. Victorian prison is a social experiment gone spectacularly wrong. The silent system and strict rules mean open conversation is banned, but humans are nothing if not resourceful. The result? A secret society of social maneuvering, whispered alliances, and unspoken rules, all played out in a world where the wrong look can earn you a week on bread and water. Every new inmate quickly learns the lay of the land. There are the old-timers, veterans of the system who know every guard's schedule, the exact temperature at which the porridge becomes self-aware, and which corner of the exercise yard gets the best sun. Befriending an old-timer is as close as you'll get to VIP status. Just don't expect them to share their hard-won secrets for free. Favors here are a kind of currency, and the exchange rate is unstable at best. You might trade half a turnip for advice on surviving the next inspection, or a sliver of cheese for news from the outside world. Then there are the muscle types, broad-shouldered and stone-faced. Their job is to look intimidating and occasionally negotiate access to the less terrible bunks. They run their own racket. You want the prime straw in the mattress? It'll cost you a week's worth of bread crusts and, probably, a compliment about their impressive biceps. Never underestimate the power of flattery in a world with no mirrors. Not to be overlooked are the fixers, inmates with a knack for obtaining what the authorities try to keep out. Need a needle for a sewing repair, a fresh bit of soap, or the local gossip. The fixer knows a guy who knows a guy, and it'll only cost you a slice of your sanity and whatever edible scraps you've managed to save. Fixers have eyes everywhere, ears always open, and a running tally of who owes what to whom. But the most influential group might just be the scribes. These are the literate few, guys who can read and write letters, draft coded messages, and, on rare occasions, produce a passable sketch of the warden as a turnip. Their skills are highly prized, especially on mail day or whenever a new inmate arrives and wants to send a desperate plea for socks to Aunt Mildred. Despite the official ban on talking, information travels fast. The walls have ears, but so do the bread loaves, the laundry buckets, and definitely the bathhouse drains. You learn to pick up on coded signals. The tap of a tin cup means trouble, 2 coughs in quick succession mean a guard is on the way, and a drawn-out sigh is Victorian prison slang for hide the evidence. Gangs are less about violence and more about mutual survival, pooling resources, swapping gossip, and watching each other's backs during labour and inspections. Loyalties, however, are famously fickle. Steal someone's last turnip, and you'll find yourself a social outcast, condemned to eat lunch alone in a corner with only the rats for company. On the other hand, help someone hide contraband, or, more heroically, trade your one dry sock for their emergency cheese, and you'll enjoy a brief spell of popularity, at least until the next potato shipment throws the power dynamic into chaos. Occasionally, the staff tries to break up the cliques, swapping cellmates or shuffling job assignments, in hopes of keeping everyone reformed. It never works. Within a day, the old networks reappear, stronger than ever, their loyalties stitched together by desperation, boredom, and the ongoing struggle against the tyranny of Victorian cuisine. By the end of your stay, You'll have mastered the art of silent negotiation, covert bread bartering, and the subtle eyebrow wiggle that means meet me by the bathhouse with the latest gossip. You might even leave with a few friends, people who understand what it's like to survive a system designed to keep you apart, and who know, as you do, that in Victorian prison, social survival is just as essential as a working bucket and a steady supply of bland, mysterious potatoes. There are animals in prison, just not the cute kind. Rats, lice, and the occasional prison cat make life even more interesting. At least someone's getting extra protein. If you're picturing a charming Victorian menagerie, think again. The closest you'll get to a pet in prison is a rat with boundary issues and an impressive survival streak. From the first day in your cell, it's clear you're not alone. No matter how thick the walls or how many times you brush off your straw mattress, something with tiny claws is always one step ahead. Rats are the true veterans of Victorian prison life. They dart through shadows, squeeze under doors, and seem to have mapped every escape route centuries before you arrived. Some prisoners try to chase them off, others learn the value of coexistence. If you're unlucky, you wake up to the telltale scuffle of paws in your bucket or the tiny gnaw marks on what's left of your bread ration. If you're lucky, you get a cellmate who can negotiate with the local rat boss, ensuring your night's sleep is only mildly interrupted. Next up, lice. They're the only creatures guaranteed a longer sentence than you. The prison uniform, scratchy, damp, and never quite clean, makes for the perfect lice condo. Personal grooming is limited to the occasional rusty comb and a prayer that you're not it in the great Victorian lice migration. Some prisoners form alliances based solely on the ability to share a good delousing session or tips on which parts of your scalp are safest. The itch is constant, and the dignity loss is complete. If you've never seen a grown man weep with joy at the sight of clean socks, you haven't really lived the Victorian prison experience. Cockroaches are everywhere, but at least they don't discriminate. They're equally at home in the bread bin, under the bed, or taking a joyride across your tin mug in the dead of night. Some prisoners name them, that's Big Stan, he guards the corner, and others plot elaborate traps, always doomed to fail. The cockroaches remain unfazed, outlasting even the longest-serving inmates, and possibly even the stone walls. Yet not all prison animals are there by accident. Enter the prison cat. If you're truly blessed, your prison has one. The cat is the only creature that's allowed to roam free, swishing its tail through corridors, inspecting the food stores, and occasionally curling up in the sunniest patch of the yard. Beloved by no one and respected by all, the prison cat has mastered the art of survival. It ignores the guards, outsmarts the rats, and occasionally bestows the privilege of a headbutt on a particularly lucky prisoner. You're never allowed to pet it, unless you're the kitchen staff, in which case you might slip it a scrap of the infamous prison meat in exchange for a moment of purring tranquility. Spiders, too, play their part. Their webs hang in every corner, draping the cell in Gothic elegance. Some prisoners treat them as mascots, convinced they bring luck, or at least eat the other pests. You learn to live with the eight-legged decorators, even offering a silent apology when cleaning day rolls around and a web has to be cleared away. Every so often, a new animal makes an appearance, a wayward bird trapped in the rafters, a mouse foolish enough to wander into the mess hall, or, rarely, a dog brought in by a visiting official. These events are major news, discussed in whispers and exaggerated in the retelling. The day someone swears they saw a squirrel is the day hope briefly flickers in the hearts of the inmates. Ultimately, your relationship with prison animals is complicated. They're both nuisance and companion, invader and distraction. You might share your bread with a rat, seek comfort in the steady presence of the cat, or simply marvel at how life finds a way, even behind the thickest walls. At least with animal company, you're reminded that survival isn't just for humans, and that, when it comes to finding crumbs and comfort, you're all in this together. Planning an escape is everyone's hobby, though actual success rates are somewhere between unlikely and please stop digging with a spoon. In Victorian prison, dreams of escape are as common as lice. Everyone has them. Nobody likes to admit how often they come around, and the results are rarely satisfying. You spend most days staring at 4 stone walls, so it's only natural your mind drifts to visions of freedom. Some prisoners plot their escape with the seriousness of a military campaign. Others just do it for the mental exercise, as a break from the relentless monotony of bread, buckets, and boiled cabbage. The classic escape plan starts with reconnaissance. You spend hours memorizing the guard rotations, studying the cracks in the yard's stone walls, and keeping an eye on which keys are hung carelessly from which belts. Conversations are carried out in a silent symphony of eyebrow raises, foot taps, and the occasional cough that means left, then duck. The truth is, though, Victorian prison was built by people who fully expected you to try your luck. The walls are tall, the fences spiked, and every possible exit is guarded by at least 3 men with suspicious moustaches and an unhealthy fondness for rules. Still, hope springs eternal, and nothing breeds creativity quite like desperation. You hear stories, passed down like secret recipes. The inmate who almost dug a tunnel and gave up at 3 feet when he hit a pipe. The great roof dash, involving a bedsheet, 2 pigeons, and a prayer. The guy who disguised himself as a mop, legendary but probably apocryphal. Everyone's favourite tale is the one about the man who bribed a rat to chew through a lock. Unfortunately, the rat unionised and demanded better rations. The tools at your disposal are what you'd expect. A blunt spoon, a broken mug, a hairpin liberated from the warden's coat. Every object becomes a potential asset. Need a distraction? A well-timed rat release in the mess hall has been known to buy you at least 5 minutes of chaos. The truly inventive try to hide in the laundry carts, but most are caught before they make it to the gate, usually by a guard who never misses the chance to scold. Nice try, but you forgot your hat. Teamwork helps, but also increases the risk. Trust is a rare currency. Betrayals are as legendary as escapes themselves. The wrong partner might rat you out for an extra lump of porridge, or simply ruin everything by sneezing at the wrong moment. Then there's the ever-watchful pigeon network, those feathery overlords strutting atop the yard's walls, witnessing every failed dash for freedom and, presumably, reporting directly to the warden. On the rarest of occasions, someone actually makes it over the wall, or at least out the door. Word spreads through the prison like wildfire. For a brief, glorious day, hope lifts the hearts of the inmates. But reality returns quickly, usually in the form of the escapee being paraded back through the gates, muddy, panting, and muttering about never trusting a map drawn on bread. His punishment is legendary, his escape attempt retold with ever-increasing flair, and his status as a local hero is assured until the next fool tries his luck. The real truth of Victorian prison escapes. It's less about actually getting out, and more about the idea of getting out. Plotting an escape gives you a purpose, a way to rebel, even if only in your mind. It's the single spark of hope that flickers in the gloom, the story you'll tell years later to anyone willing to listen. I almost made it, but the spoon just wasn't up to code. For most, escape is a dream, best left as a dream. But as you lie on your straw mattress, counting bricks and plotting impossible routes, you can't help but smile at the thought. Because hope, like a good rat or a rusty spoon, is hard to keep locked up for long. Eventually the day comes when the gates open. But after years inside, the outside world feels just as overwhelming, and freedom comes with its own brand of anxiety. You'd think this would be the happiest moment of your life. Instead, it feels suspiciously like someone has played a prank on you. One that involves paperwork, squinting at daylight, and discovering that the world has stubbornly continued spinning without your permission. The night before your release, sleep is impossible. You toss on your straw mattress, nerves tangled tighter than the old oakum you used to pick. What will the first breath of real air taste like? Will you even remember how to walk without a guard watching your every move? And, most importantly, do you still like potatoes? Morning arrives with a kind of hush, The guards are almost polite, handing you a bundle of civilian clothes that don't fit and a stack of stern instructions that definitely do. If you're lucky, you get your old boots back. If not, it's a pair of shoes that seem designed for maximum blister production. Your uniform, itchy and grey, is finally stripped away. The feeling of fabric that isn't state-issued is both thrilling and deeply confusing. For a split second, you expect a warden to shout, "Just kidding, back to the crank," but the moment passes. It's really happening. There's a short, final walk down the corridor, past the cells where voices mutter encouragement or snarky farewells. You leave behind the familiar sounds, the distant clang of tin cups, the scuffle of guards' boots, the echo of sermons in the chapel. At the gate, you're handed your meagre belongings, a comb, a battered letter, a coin if you're lucky, and a farewell so perfunctory you wonder if you were ever really there at all. Some part of you expects fanfare, or at least a handshake. What you get is a nod and the distant slam of the prison door behind you. The outside is bright, loud, and impossibly fast. After years of routine, silence, and scheduled misery, the world is a barrage of sensations. People hurry along the streets, dressed in colours you barely remember. Horses clatter, vendors shout, and children laugh, a sound so foreign it almost startles you. You stand for a moment on the threshold, suitcase in hand, fighting the urge to check for your prison number or scan the horizon for the nearest guard. Freedom, as it turns out, is exhausting. You're expected to make choices, where to walk, what to eat, whether to trust the smiling stranger who swears they remember you from somewhere they don't. There's no schedule, no bell, no warden glaring over your shoulder. Simple things, ordering a meal, buying a loaf of bread, remembering to look both ways before crossing the street, feel like advanced skills you were never taught. And let's not even talk about rejoining your family, who somehow managed to age, change, and learn to live without your daily updates about lice and bread. You'll find your body changed too. The beds outside feel too soft, the silence too silent. You wake at dawn, waiting for the warden's inspection, and stare suspiciously at every pigeon you see. The habits of prison, the way you ration food, hide the best bits, listen for trouble in the smallest sounds, stick with you like old scars. For many, release comes with hope and fear in equal measure. Will you find work? Will people forgive and forget? Can you ever truly stop scanning for the rulebook in every room? Some do, some don't. But all walk away from the gates carrying a new definition of freedom, one that includes uncertainty, opportunity, and the bittersweet memory of a time when every day was mapped out for you. So as you leave the prison behind, shoes pinching, nerves jangling, and head spinning, you can finally say you survived Victorian prison. The world is wide, confusing, and sometimes even welcoming. But one thing's for sure, after years inside, you'll never take a locked door or an open one for granted again. Some cellmates have stories that could fill a penny dreadful. Meet the highwaymen, the rebels, and the master forgers whose antics made headlines and sometimes new laws. Victorian prisons were the original reality TV. Except, instead of bickering over a hot tub, your cast of characters bickered over porridge and the legal definition of contraband. Even in a world built on silence and sameness, certain inmates managed to carve out legendary reputations, sometimes literally in the walls, and sometimes figuratively in the whispered stories that darted through corridors faster than the guards. Let's start with the highwaymen. These were the Instagram influencers of their day. If Instagram only allowed posts about robbing carriages and wearing really impressive hats. They arrived in prison with swagger, their reputations preceding them. Other inmates eyed them with a mix of envy and suspicion. Some highwaymen leaned into their own legend, trading stories for an extra crust of bread or the privilege of sitting near the fire, well, near the warm pipe. Victorian prisons weren't big on actual flames. Their tales always involved moonlit roads, dashing escapes, and the one time they let a noblewoman go because she seemed awfully tired. Next, the rebels, political prisoners, Chartists, and anyone who'd ever said, "down with the system," a little too loudly at the wrong tea party. Rebels added flavor to the prison stew, passing around coded notes and refusing to march in perfect circles. The guards despised them. The other inmates sometimes did too if it meant another round of punishment for everyone. Still, a rebel could turn bread and water into a manifesto and leave the prison with their spirit only slightly bent, but never fully broken. Then there were the forgers, the Victorian version of hackers, except with quill pens, ink, and a gift for elegant handwriting. Master forgers could fake anything. Birth certificates, government documents, or letters from distant aunts promising an early release. One infamous forger, known simply as the Quill, was rumoured to have passed notes to half the prison before the guards caught on that nobody's Aunt Mildred had that many nephews. Forgers were in high demand, especially come mail day, and some could trade a fake signature for a month's worth of decent rations. The notorious scandals? Oh, they were plentiful. There was the tale of the Great Porridge Heist, in which 3 inmates distracted the warden with a spontaneous hymn, while a 4th made off with a week's supply of breakfast. Or the mysterious escape of Silent Tom, a man so quiet no one realised he'd gone missing until the warden found his cell occupied by an impressively lifelike bread sculpture. The best stories always grew with each retelling. The scandal of the guard caught sneaking extra soap to a favourite inmate became, over time, an epic involving bribery, star-crossed romance, and a daring chase with a mop. Some inmates even became celebrities on the outside. Newspapers of the day loved nothing more than a good scandal, especially if it involved a colourful character or a particularly daring escape attempt. Letters from outside sometimes included clippings, and for a day or two, an inmate might bask in the peculiar glow of fame before being put straight back to oakum picking. Fame and fortune be damned. The real scandal, of course, was the prison system itself. The tales of suffering, courage, and occasionally bizarre ingenuity became part of a growing conversation about reform. Sometimes, the legends and their stories changed things. New rules about food, about punishment, about who got to keep the best rats for company. By the time you leave, you've met living legends, sat beside men whose lives read like fiction, and learned that everyone, famous, infamous, or just unlucky, shares the same hard beds, eats the same grey porridge, and endures the same daily grind. The only difference is that, years later, people might actually want to hear your side of the story. So yes, Victorian prison had its stars. But the real headlines? The stories of endurance, of wit, of one more day survived, scandalous in their own stubborn way. Learn about the well-meaning, and mostly doomed, attempts to make prison life more humane, and why slightly less horrible was still pretty bad. If you'd visited a prison in the early Victorian era, you might have walked away thinking, wow, this place makes a graveyard look like a health spa. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on your standards, the powers that be eventually decided things had gotten a bit too medieval. Enter prison reformers, a cast of do-gooders, moral crusaders, and civil servants who believed, deep down, that suffering should at least be organised. The first big idea was the separate system, which insisted that every inmate should spend their days and nights in solitary contemplation, alone, all the time. On paper, this was supposed to encourage repentance and reform. In reality, it just turned hundreds of prisoners into highly imaginative conversationalists, mostly with their furniture, their lice, or any pigeons brave enough to land on the windowsill. Reformers realised after a few years that too much solitude didn't breed good citizens so much as highly creative basket weavers with 1,000-yard stare. Then came the silent system, where prisoners worked and marched together in silence, like a choir of very sad mimes. You could see other people but not talk to them, which is just enough interaction to remind you what you're missing. Discipline improved, at least if you define discipline as nobody's laughing. But depression and mental breakdowns skyrocketed, and the only people happy were the guards, briefly. But the reforms didn't stop there. Victorian reformers, after all, were obsessed with details. Prison diets were overhauled, slightly less sawdust in the bread, an occasional nod to the existence of vegetables, and a few new rules to prevent scurvy from being the top cause of escape attempts. Medical care was upgraded from just leeches to leeches and a very stern doctor. New uniforms were issued that were, miraculously, just as itchy as before, but now came with even more stripes for the fashion-forward felon. Perhaps the most ambitious reform was education. The theory went, teach a man to read, and he's less likely to steal your horse. So, classrooms were introduced. Attendance was compulsory. The reading material was relentlessly moral, and everyone quickly learned the best way to look thoughtful while daydreaming about roast beef. For some, it worked. A handful of former inmates became letter writers, clerks, or even minor poets. Most just became experts at hiding crossword puzzles inside sermons. Inspections became regular, records were kept, and the idea of rehabilitation started popping up in dusty government reports. There were even experiments with less brutal punishments. Fewer public floggings, more timeouts in solitary, and a genuine attempt to provide slightly better beds. The bar was low, but hey, progress is progress. Of course, not everyone agreed with the changes. Some wardens clung to the old ways, extra labour, bad food, and the occasional lecture on character-building suffering. Others embraced the reforms, convinced that a dash of kindness and indoor plumbing would fix everything. The truth, as always, landed somewhere in between. A hodgepodge of the old and the new, served up with a side of confusion and paperwork. For the average prisoner, reform meant your porridge might have a surprise carrot in it, your guard might frown a little less, and your chances of surviving a cold went from no to maybe. The beds were still hard, the days were still long, but a tiny window cracked open, just enough for hope to sneak in, or at least for someone to air out their socks. Victorian prison reforms didn't create paradise, but they did nudge life from utterly unbearable to almost tolerable on a good day, with a favourable breeze. For those inside, that counted for something. And for future generations, it meant that even the darkest places could, eventually, with enough effort, protests, and paperwork, get just a little bit lighter. Ever wondered what prison guards actually did? Besides patrolling and inventing new rules, it mostly involves paperwork, glowering, and occasionally losing at chess to a rat. Victorian prison guards, known as warders or turnkeys if you want to sound fancy, have one job above all else, to make sure nobody has any fun. Their day starts before yours. While you're still shivering under your straw blanket, they're already stomping through the corridors, jangling an absurdly large ring of keys and muttering about how things were tougher in their day. The keys are mostly for show. The real power lies in their ability to make you nervous with a single raised eyebrow. The morning routine is all about inspections. The guards march up and down, peering into cells with a look that says, "I hope you didn't hide your porridge crust in your sock again." Beds are checked, uniforms are scrutinized, and if even a single wrinkle or dust bunny is spotted, expect a long-winded lecture on discipline, followed by extra chores you didn't know existed. Prisoners wonder if the guards have a secret manual called 101 Ways to Find Fault Before Breakfast. When the inspection parade ends, it's off to the paperwork. You thought bureaucracy was bad on the outside? Victorian prison guards are masters of the logbook. Every movement, every cough, every particularly expressive sigh is entered in triplicate. They track who went to the infirmary, who got extra bread, and who has an eyebrow that might be plotting insurrection. Nobody actually knows where all the paperwork goes. Some say there's a special dungeon for unsorted forms, guarded by the world's angriest pigeon. Between rounds of judging and jotting, guards supervise prison labour. This is the main event, watching a parade of inmates break rocks, pick oakum, or scrub floors until the blisters form their own union. Guards pace behind you, arms folded, issuing the occasional faster or not like that. Some develop a talent for spotting slackers at 100 paces. Others get distracted and start playing tic-tac-toe with the tally marks on the walls. Either way, they make it clear that the main reason for your labour is their own entertainment. Lunchtime is a highlight, at least for the guards. They get to stand in the warmth of the kitchen while you collect your portion of sadness and stale bread. Sometimes, if they're in a generous mood, they'll let the cat eat first. If not, they'll invent a new rule about how to hold your spoon, then spend 15 minutes enforcing it. Prison guards can turn "don't slurp" into a constitutional amendment. Afternoons are for patrols, endless loops around the yard, up and down the corridors, checking that nobody's plotting an escape, hiding contraband, or organizing a breakdancing contest. The last happened once, and nobody speaks of it. Every now and then, a guard has to break up a scuffle, confiscate a suspicious potato, or explain why chess with a rat is not part of the official rehabilitation program. The rats, for the record, remain undefeated. But being a Victorian prison guard isn't just about being stern, it's also about office politics. There's gossip among the staff, who got the easiest shift, who's secretly afraid of the cat, and who still can't remember the difference between the keys to cell 8 and the privy. They have rivalries with the kitchen, silent battles with the laundry staff, and the eternal struggle to keep their boots clean in a place that manufactures mud. As the day winds down, guards walk the cells for one last round of just making sure you're still here. They jot more notes, exchange nods, and sometimes, very rarely, offer a word of advice or a quick joke. It's not all bad. Some guards have their moments of decency, smuggling in a bit of soap, turning a blind eye to a harmless prank, or sharing a wink with the inmate who's made it through another day. For all their stern faces, guards are as much prisoners of the system as anyone else. The walls keep everyone in. Some just have better keys. Even when you leave, prison never really leaves you. The habits, the nightmares, the insatiable urge to hoard bread crusts, they're all yours, forever. Welcome home. They say time heals all wounds, but Victorian prison is the exception that proves the rule. When you finally walk out the gates, blinking, clutching your meager possessions, and suspiciously eyeing every pigeon, you soon discover that prison has left you with more than just a distaste for grey uniforms and cold porridge. It has rewired your instincts, altered your reflexes, and gifted you a peculiar set of skills that nobody outside the walls appreciates. But hey, you're resilient. Even if you do flinch every time you hear keys jangle, the first thing you'll notice is the food, or rather, your relationship with it. After years spent rationing every crumb, trading potatoes for gossip, and daydreaming about cheese, you find yourself hoarding bread crusts in your new life. Loaves disappear suspiciously fast in your kitchen. You wake up from a nap clutching a stale roll, muttering about sharing with the rats. The urge to eat in silence dies hard, and if someone comments on your table manners, you glare at them like a warden caught you smiling during roll call. Sleep is a challenge too. Having spent so many nights listening to the prison orchestra, featuring coughing guy, snoring champion, and the occasional existential wailer, absolute silence feels wrong. You keep a straw mattress just in case, and are genuinely suspicious of soft beds and actual pillows. You may even find yourself reaching for a bucket in the middle of the night. Old habits die hard, and, in some cases, so do basic concepts of plumbing. Personal hygiene? You're overly grateful for hot water, proper soap, and towels that haven't served a double life as makeshift window insulation. Still, you might ration your soap, convinced that the next bar won't come for another 6 months, and get anxious if you're ever more than 10 feet from a comb. Friends and family may find your newfound appreciation for cleanliness inspiring right up until you begin inspecting their hair for lice out of sheer muscle memory. Social interactions are their own adventure. You're used to the silent system, so you now communicate via eyebrow waggles and subtle foot shuffles. Office meetings seem eerily like inspection parades, and you instinctively scan every room for authority figures. When someone gives you a task, you finish it twice as fast as everyone else, terrified someone might come by and assign you a bonus hour of oakum picking. Trust, that fragile commodity, is always in short supply. You size up every group for hidden cliques, Never take the best seat in the room, and keep a mental tally of who owes you what, even if it's just a borrowed pencil. A harmless lunchroom potato will set off a flashback to the days of clandestine trades and whispered deals. Your loved ones wonder why you always eat facing the door, or why you keep your socks neatly bundled in the corner. But it's not all caution and quirks. There's a strange pride in your survival, in knowing you made it through a place that chewed up and spat out the hopeful. The stories you tell of the legendary rat escape, the bread that could crack teeth, the warden who judged your posture, become both cautionary tales and badges of honor. You appreciate small freedoms with a zeal that makes everyone else look ungrateful. Rain on your face, real meat at dinner, and the absolute miracle of being allowed to nap without someone shouting at you. Paradise. You may find yourself mentoring others, offering wisdom on surviving life's hardships, or at the very least giving practical advice about avoiding Victorian-style consequences. Your jokes are a little darker, your patience a little thinner, and your gratitude a lot louder. Prison scars are real, but so is your resilience. Life outside may be chaotic, confusing, and sometimes disappointingly free of dramatic escapes, but you carry with you a stubborn hope, and yes, a few bread crusts, just in case. Even in a place built for silence, news travels at warp speed. The guards think you're mute, but every cough, blink, and badly scrubbed spoon is part of an underground information network. If you want to know who's plotting escape, who just got extra bread, or which warden tripped over his own ego, just pay attention. The rumour mill is the only thing here that runs faster than your anxiety. The genius of Victorian prison gossip is that it thrives in an environment designed to crush communication. The silent system says no talking. But nobody said anything about the elaborate ballet of glances, sighs, and coded gestures that keep the social wheels turning. You soon learn that, behind every pair of stoic eyes, there's a mind cataloguing every small detail for later distribution. Forget Twitter. This is Morse code with a mop and a poker face. The grapevine begins in the most unlikely of places. The bucket line, the bread queue, the communal bath. A cough here, a throat clear there, and suddenly everyone knows which prisoner got an extra slice of cheese and who found a real and deeply suspect potato in their soup. The masters of the rumour trade are the laundry crew. No one in the prison sees, hears, or smells more than the people elbow deep in everyone's dirty secrets. The way a sock is folded, the pattern of stains, the presence or absence of a certain patch, these are the scrolls upon which the daily news is written. Naturally, not all information is accurate. Rumours pass through so many hands, eyes, and mouthless mouthpieces that by the time they reach your cell, the warden tripped on the stairs has become. The warden was bested in single combat by a particularly large rat and is leaving to join the circus. But the facts rarely matter. What counts is the thrill of the story. The currency of gossip is entertainment, not truth. Whispers about escape plans are especially juicy. Everyone's heard about the latest plot. Someone's digging a tunnel. Someone else is smuggling in supplies. And the laundry maid supposedly has a map tattooed under her apron. You nod sagely, add your own flourishes, and pass it on, knowing full well that the last escape attempt ended when the would-be Houdini got stuck halfway through the pantry window and had to be rescued by the kitchen cat. Gossip is also survival. It tells you which guard to avoid. The one with the limp and the mean left hook. Which jobs are about to open up. Usually after someone accidentally drops a hot bucket on their foot, and who got a letter from home. Mail days are the Super Bowl of the rumour season, with everyone speculating about the contents before the ink is even dry. Did someone receive news of a fortune? Did someone's sweetheart finally write back? Was the letter from Aunt Mildred really addressed to the handsomest man in cell 12, or was that just artistic license? But beware, not all news is harmless. False rumours about informers can make life miserable. The wrong word in the wrong ear might see someone on the wrong end of the bread queue for weeks. Still, there are unwritten rules. Never betray the source. Never gossip about laundry mishaps unless you want yours aired in return, and always check your own bed for rats before sharing the latest tale of vermin triumph. The guards know gossip exists, they just don't know the half of it. Sometimes, a particularly clever warden tries to feed false information into the system just to see where it pops up, like Victorian social engineering. More often, they end up the butt of the joke, their oddest habits immortalized in whispered legend. In the end, prison gossip is more than idle chatter. It's a lifeline, a game, and sometimes the only entertainment you've got. It binds the inmates together, gives them a reason to smile, or at least smirk, and keeps the spark of rebellion and hope alive, even in the darkest corners of the prison yard. Rules say you can't speak, but nobody said you can't communicate. From etched chalk marks on cell walls to cryptic laundry folding, inmates invent ways to swap messages right under the noses of the guards. If you're lucky, you might receive a whole sonnet in Morse code, composed with the rhythmic scrape of a tin cup. In a place where every word is rationed and conversation is more dangerous than soup on meat day, creativity becomes the only real freedom. Victorian prisoners quickly transform their world into a masterclass in covert communication, finding loopholes in silence that would impress even the craftiest of lawyers. It starts with the walls. The oldest cells are a palimpsest of etchings and coded doodles, layer upon layer of advice, warnings, and not-so-subtle jabs at the warden's sideburns. The marks might seem random to a casual observer, a chalk line here, a cluster of dots there, but to an inmate fluent in the dialect, each scratch tells a story. Beware cell 14. Drafty or bucket leaks. Avoid the left corner. Some go further, inscribing entire love poems or epic insults, their secrets hidden in plain sight. The guards, blissfully unaware, chalk up the scribbles to boredom, never realizing that half the prison's emotional history is mapped right under their noses. Laundry, that humblest of prison routines, also becomes a message board. Prisoners learn to fold shirts, towels, or even undergarments in ways that convey everything from meat at exercise yard to the stew is extra questionable today. A sock tucked inside a shirt means all clear. Two mismatched buttons sewn side by side say, "Watch out, the guard is in a mood." Some inmates become so adept at laundry code that a passing pile of linens can trigger a whole day's worth of clandestine activity. Tin cups and cutlery are instruments of both dining and drama. A steady tap 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 in Morse code can carry a message from one end of the wing to the other. Of course, it takes skill to decipher a conversation when every other cell is trying to send more bread at the same time. But the code breakers among the inmates take pride in their ability to turn chaos into clarity. Some even compose full sonnets, tapping out lines of secret longing or, more commonly, complaints about the bread. Bread itself becomes part of the code. In a world where mealtime is the only regular gathering, prisoners hide slivers of onion or crust in prearranged patterns, like edible hieroglyphics. A chunk missing from the left side of a loaf signals a late-night rendezvous by the privy. A perfectly square bite out of the middle says, "The cat has stolen your lunch again." And then there's the art of facial expressions. A raised eyebrow can mean anything from "don't eat the meat" to "the warden's wig is on backward." Inmates develop an entire unspoken language of glances, sighs, and creative throat clearing, turning the prison into a Victorian version of international espionage, with a dress code made entirely of stripes and regret. The guards, for their part, catch on to some tricks, but never the whole network. Every now and then, an especially suspicious turnkey will try to crack the code, folding his own socks in increasingly elaborate ways or knocking on cell doors in Morse code, just to see what happens. Usually, all he gets is a reputation for eccentricity and, if he's lucky, a very puzzled rat. Over time, these clandestine systems become second nature, passed down from inmate to inmate like secret family recipes. New arrivals are quickly initiated, often with a nod and a well-timed tap on the wall. Soon, even the shyest newcomer is swapping news, sharing jokes and plotting imaginary escapes with nothing more than a towel and a knowing look. In Victorian prison, words might be forbidden, but silence was never truly golden. It was just another puzzle to solve, a wall to scratch, a code to crack, proof that, when freedom is denied, the human urge to connect will always find a way. Once in a blue moon, you're paraded into a drafty visitation room for a reunion with family or friends. There's a thick pane of scratched glass, a guard eavesdropping on every word, and nothing says, "I miss you," like your mother trying not to cry while your little brother tries to trade you a dead beetle he found outside. At least someone's thinking of you. Visiting day is one of those rare events that you both eagerly anticipate and quietly dread. In the weeks leading up to it, rumors swirl through the prison like the scent of suspicious meat on stew night. Will your family show? Will your name make the list? And, most importantly, will your relatives remember not to bring up that incident with the turnip in front of the warden? Hope mixes with anxiety, and by the time your name is called, your nerves are already frayed like an old piece of rope. The journey to the visitation room is a ceremony in itself. You're marched through echoing corridors, past curious guards and fellow inmates who offer everything from knowing nods to outright envy. The room is always colder than expected, decorated with the sort of utilitarian charm only a government office can muster. The furniture is hard, the air thick with the scent of disinfectant and anticipation, and every surface, especially the glass dividing you from your loved ones, bears the marks of 1,000 awkward goodbyes. The rules are clear. No passing of gifts, no unsupervised conversation, no physical contact. Instead, you sit on one side of a battered wooden table, your family on the other, separated by glass thick enough to muffle your voice and amplify every uncomfortable pause. The guard stands close enough to hear everything but far enough away to make it clear that any attempt at privacy is futile. You wave, your mother waves, and your little brother immediately tries to climb under the table, only to be retrieved, beetle still firmly in hand, by an exasperated aunt. Conversations on visiting day are an odd blend of everyday banter and the kind of questions that would baffle even the most experienced diplomat. Your mother wants to know if you're eating enough, if you're getting enough sleep, and if the rumors about the porridge are true. They are. The porridge is a universal experience, like rain or disappointment. Your siblings make faces at you through the glass, their cheeks pressed so hard you worry they'll be stuck that way. An uncle tries to slip you a crumpled note. "For luck," he mouths, as the guard immediately confiscates it and squints suspiciously at the phrase, "Don't trust the cat." Everyone struggles to find the right words. Your family wants to comfort you without making things worse. You want to reassure them without accidentally revealing that last week's stew contained a shoe. The conversation veers from gentle scolding, "Honestly, what were you thinking, stealing a cart of onions?" to awkward encouragement. "We're proud of you, sort of. Mostly. Please come home soon." There's laughter, there are tears, and, if you're very lucky, there's a moment when it almost feels like you're all together again, just sitting around the kitchen table. Eventually, the guard taps the glass and gives you the wrap-it-up stare. Farewells are a flurry of blown kisses, hopeful waves, and last-minute reminders. Don't eat the green bread. Your little brother presses the beetle against the glass one final time, as if offering you a treasure that only you could appreciate. The visit ends as abruptly as it began, and you're ushered back to your cell, heart a little heavier and lighter at the same time. Afterwards, you replay every moment, every word. Did your mother look thinner? Did your father really say he'd write? Did your sister wink at the guard? And if so, why? Visiting day is a strange cocktail of hope, embarrassment, love, and longing, a reminder that life outside still goes on, beetles and all, and that, even behind thick glass and stone walls, you're not as alone as you feel. So here we are, at the end of another long, exhausting day behind bars, a day spent in silence, in hard labour, in conversations with the cracks in your wall, and, on really social days, the local prison rat. Maybe tonight you finally managed to outsmart the prison loaf, Or perhaps you just accepted defeat and let the porridge win. Either way, you survived. And that, in the Victorian prison system, is basically the gold medal. As you drift off to sleep in your own bed, hopefully soft, hopefully bug-free, hopefully without a guard checking your breathing every 20 minutes, take a moment to remember the resilience of the people who actually lived this. The ones who endured endless days of monotony, indignity, and hygiene that was more of a threat than a promise. The ones who faced punishment that could break the body and still somehow found tiny ways to rebel. A smuggled message, a forbidden joke, a borrowed scrap of hope. It's easy to laugh at the absurdity of it all. The crusty uniforms, the prison cat with more rights than the inmates, the bread so hard you could use it for masonry. But behind the dark comedy was real, relentless hardship. A place that tested every human instinct for comfort, connection, and sanity. Somehow, people found a way through, if not with their dignity intact, then at least with a few great stories and possibly some questionable tattoos. So tonight, as you settle in with your clean sheets and functioning plumbing, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to your ancestors, and to anyone, anywhere, who survived nights that felt longer than a Victorian sermon. Because history may be gross and terrifying, but it's also proof that people are stubborn, hopeful, and more than a little ridiculous. Sleep well, stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next midnight misadventure. Good night.